Hi, this is Mike Elliott, and you're watching the Cannabis Financial Network. In this segment, we'll be talking to Mr. Troy Dayton. He's the CEO of ArcView Group. With deep industry experience, the ArcView Group is ushering in the next generation of cannabis-related businesses with the ArcView Investor Network, Sea Change Research, Cannassure Insurance Services, and other groundbreaking ventures. Good afternoon, Troy. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
To start off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the ArcView Group?
Sure. The ArcView Group started in 2010. I founded it with Steve D'Angelo, who is known as the proprietor of the largest cannabis retail business in the country, Harborside Health Center in Oakland. And we started ArcView because we both saw a similar problem. He was running Harborside, and lots of people were coming to him with ideas for new products and new ventures, and lots of people were coming to him wanting to invest in new products and new ventures, and he had no way to sort of vet these companies or to facilitate any of that interaction between these investors and the companies. I similarly had a similar problem. I was raising money for the Marijuana Policy Project at the time in Northern California, and I was raising money from high net worth individuals who just cared about legalizing marijuana, and also raising money from the new burgeoning legal cannabis industry around 2008, 2009. And I saw that these two groups really had different skills and different knowledge and really wanted to start interacting. And so we started the ArcView Group with the goal of helping to bridge that gap and bring in a new era of cannabis-related businesses. And probably the biggest project that we've undertaken is the ArcView Investor Network, which is basically an angel group, angel investor group for the cannabis industry.
And do you deal with both public and private companies, or primarily private companies?
Primarily private companies, although we have had a number of public companies pitch the investors as well.
And could you just describe for us briefly the current investment climate for cannabis enterprises?
Well, it's amazing. I mean, things are changing at such a rapid pace. We have our meetings every 2 or 3 months, and there is a notable difference in the type of people, the number of people, and the quality of the deals and the size of the investments every 2 or 3 months over the last year. Ever since Colorado and Washington legalized cannabis on November 6th of last year, it's just been remarkable how fast it has increased in excitement and the amount of activity that's occurring. So, when we first started the investor network, basically, there was just like a dozen investors, and for the companies that were pitching, if you could complete a sentence, we would give you a slot. And now we get hundreds of applications, and we need to whittle those down to about 10 new companies per quarter. And so the quality of the companies is really increasing as people start to realize that the cannabis industry is probably the next great American industry, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see something go from underground to above ground. I was part of the dot-com boom and part of the renewable energy boom, and this is just one of those things where we've seen all of these booms, and this is the next one. And the people that are getting in now are going to have a unique opportunity. But just like any boom, there's going to be some winners and there's going to be some losers. Most companies aren't going to do well, but there are going to be some that are going to do tremendously well. And so what people are trying to figure out right now is who's going to be sitting on this geyser when it goes off, and trying to figure out which companies are going to do that and how they can be part of those companies. And that's part of what we do at the ArcView Investor Network, that's ground zero for figuring all of that out.
So where do you see most of the investments in cannabis being made? Is it in grow ops, technology, dispensaries, et cetera?
Well, there's really 3 different areas for investment, 4 different areas really for investment in this sector. There are companies that are reaching the end consumer. So these are like pipes and consumption devices and apparel and social networks, etc. This is an area that's already been well developed because people have been selling cannabis complements and cannabis devices for years. They've just been calling them for tobacco. So this is already a fairly well-developed industry. But we are seeing a lot of changes and a lot of excitement in that industry because there are new players entering the field and it's being taken a little more seriously and people can be honest about what they are selling. Then you've got the market of selling to cultivators, cannabis cultivators. Well, it's no surprise that cannabis has been being grown extensively before legalization. And in fact, it's considered the #1 cash crop in the United States. And so people have been marketing to cannabis cultivators for a very, very long time. So again, this is also a fairly well-developed industry. What's changed is that they're starting to be honest about what they're selling for. It's not for tomatoes, it's actually for cannabis. And there's also a shift in who is cultivating and what they're cultivating and the size of what they're cultivating as a result of regulation and as a result of the shifting economics that's happening across the country. So again, there's definitely a lot of money to be made there as well as those shifts happen. But the one area where it's a brand new market is the people that are selling products and services to retailers and to wholesalers, right? So retailers and infused product manufacturers, because there's the current dispensary operator, the current retail operator in this space bears almost no resemblance to a drug dealer on the street. Like a drug dealer on the street does not have insurance. They don't advertise. They don't need financial services. They don't need insurance. They don't need all of the kinds of things that a real business needs. And so people addressing that market, that's a whole new area where you've basically got an industry starting from scratch. And so that is really exciting. And then also you have dispensaries and cultivations. These are people that are getting licenses to be cannabis businesses that deal directly with the plant. And we're starting just since the Justice Department memo to see a lot more investment directly into those types of businesses because those have the most legal risk. But in states where they're giving out only a small number of licenses, it's a really unique business opportunity where if you're one of the people to get those licenses, you've got a real head start on becoming a really key part of this industry. So those are sort of the 4 areas that where there's investment happening. And there's very different size companies, different size investments, and very different market dynamics for all 4 of those segments.
And what are some of the trends you're seeing in investment amounts and the number of those interested in the space?
Yeah, well, I mean, when you're talking about seed stage companies, companies who are in their prototype phase or in their very beginning phase of starting to offer their product, these are companies that are generally looking for between $100,000 and $1 million, generally on the lower end of that. And we're starting to see there be a real appetite for that, particularly ancillary businesses that don't touch the plant directly, but that serve the industry in some way. And we've come up with actually 12 ancillary business segments, which I can send you and you can throw up on the screen if you want, of areas for ancillary businesses. And then, we're seeing larger size investments in the companies that deal directly with the plant, sometimes in the $1 million to $3 million category, and sometimes even larger. But those tend to not be ones that we see at the investor network. Those are deals that tend to be happening privately that I'm hearing about. So we're starting to see multi-state, people owning multiple dispensaries, having chains of dispensaries in various states, and that's a real opportunity there.
And what are some of the risks that remain with investing in the cannabis industry at this point?
Well, I mean, who knows, right? Who knows what the risks are? I mean, obviously, cannabis is still illegal federally, and so investors that are investing directly into cannabis businesses are running the risk of federal prosecution. This latest statement from the Obama administration is very great. This is the best thing to come out of the federal government in a long time. It's very encouraging, but it's just a memo. It's not a change in law. And we're very unlikely to see a change in federal law completely through Congress, probably for another, 5 years until we see any real movement on the federal level to change the laws. So the benefit to that is that it gives the little guy a chance to make it in this. In any other industry that has as many customers and is as big and is growing as fast as the cannabis industry, everybody, for both investors and for companies, would be competing with really big companies, with the names that we kind of know, like big, huge multinational companies. But those companies just aren't in this. Institutional investors are not in this. And so it really gives an opportunity to everybody else to really get a crack at the next great American industry before it all shifts in probably just a few years.
So what kind of exits are these companies seeking? Do you see private companies that are looking to go public, or what else are they trying to do in terms of exit strategies?
Yeah, I think that for a lot of the ancillary businesses, their way of going about it is to seek to be acquired by a non-cannabis equivalent, right? So one of the companies that's been funded by ArcView investors is Canna Security America. And this is a security company, a very similar model to ADT. And they focus on providing security services for licensed cultivators and licensed dispensaries. And the only reason ADT and any of these other big security companies aren't in this industry yet is for a couple reasons. One, they fear there might be some a regulatory and or perceptual risk. Two, the market just isn't big enough yet for them to be paying attention to it. And three, it's very idiosyncratic, right? There are different types of needs that cannabis companies need that they don't know a lot about, right? So in a couple of years, what's going to change is that the size of the market is going to massively increase, and it'll really be on their radar. The reputational risk and their perception of the regulatory risk will likely disappear, and but the market will still be idiosyncratic, and they're going to be much more likely to want to acquire a company like Canna Security than they will want to just get in the market themselves. And so for almost every ancillary business, you can think of a non-cannabis equivalent to their business in the general economy. And so for those, I think that it's most likely the scenario is that we're going to see acquisitions from larger companies. For the companies that deal directly with cannabis, I think we're going to see roll-ups, both via public companies and private companies that go out and create real economies of scale, at least on a state level, with various outfits throughout the country, and that I doubt that we will start to see for a couple more years. But also, a lot of those companies are less likely to want to sell because if it's in a state that has limited number of licenses, these are businesses that are going to throw off a lot of cash. And so they're businesses that can be profitable in very short time. And so a lot of them will, they'll pay off their investors and, they'll just be paying dividends. But also a lot of these companies are in states that require them to be nonprofit. There's only a few states that allow for-profit dispensaries. And in a nonprofit, you can't own a equity stake. And so really the only options there are loans, high interest loans, which it turns out a lot of investors are very interested in. in providing capital at a high interest loan rate. And we're seeing interest rates anywhere from 15 to 25% in unsecured debt, which is very interesting, very appealing to a lot of investors, particularly given that the federal government has said they're going to allow the states to move forward with their regulation plans. And so you see that for a lot of these businesses, getting traditional business loans and the traditional ways that people raise capital just aren't really available to them yet.
And what advice would you give an investor who's interested in the cannabis industry?
Well, I think the advice I would give is that this industry is far more complicated, nuanced, and different than you're imagining it is. And I've seen a lot of investors make some really early bad moves in this space, particularly by purchasing, public stocks in the space. I just generally don't think that entering the public markets, that this industry is really ready for that. And I think a lot of companies are really taking advantage of the excitement around the industry in the public markets without a ton of really good businesses underneath those stock tickers. So I'd be wary of that. I think like in the beginning of any new boom, the real opportunities tend to be in the private companies, in early and seed stage companies. And I think that'll be the case in the cannabis industry for quite some time. One of the reasons why people join the ArcView Investor Network is because they get to be in a room with the most highest concentrated group of key players and key investors in the country. So, I don't have a ton of advice for investors, but what I do know is that the people that do have the knowledge that you'll need to make the right investments, they are members of the ArcView Investor Network. We have close to 100 investors, and we gather every 2 to 3 months. And it is a very wide range of knowledge and experience. And it's amazing to see just the depth of experience that people have and the nuance that it takes to really invest in a smart way in this very, very unique once-in-a-lifetime industry.
And last, can you give us some highlights from the upcoming second edition of the ArcView Group's Sea Change Research Report that comes out next month?
Yeah, well, on November 5th, we'll be announcing our numbers. We've spent 6 months doing some really deep research into this market and to the different state markets and to the national market and how that is going to move forward over the coming years. And, the short answer is we're predicting pretty extensive growth. And the actual numbers will be out on November 5th. But this report is going to have a lot of the deep analysis and a lot of the deep nuances that make this industry both fascinating and unique from an investment standpoint if you really understand the idiosyncrasies of it. And so this report the executive summary will come out on November 5th. And you'll be able to order the report. You can actually order the report right now, pre-order it for $100 less than what it'll be coming out for. So it's $375 on our website. It'll be $475 when it comes out. And the first report that we did, it was the most quoted, highest level look into this industry, very similar to what you might see in other industries. But our industry is a lot harder because it's much harder to get the data. But we know we have the kind of connections and knowledge in the industry to be able to reach a high number of respondents and to be able to make sense of that data. We've got an amazing team that's working on it.
Troy, that's all the questions I had for today. Were there
Great.
any other comments or anything else you wanted to add before we close?
Yeah, but just to say a little bit about the ArcView Investor Network, it's kind of like we work exactly like Shark Tank, right? So we have a number of investors, and then the companies come and they pitch the investors, and then in some cases the companies raise capital from the investors. We have a really, really good time together. There's a lot of great camaraderie, and I think there's a certain excitement in the air about the cannabis industry right now. And as a result, it results in a lot of camaraderie. Some people are involved because they see this as an impact investment, because they want to see a day when not a single adult is punished for this plant, and they see business as a unique way to help make that happen while also profiting. The second reason people are involved is because they want a good return, right? They want to make money on something that other people aren't paying attention to. And the third reason people are involved is because they want to be part of a new industry. They want to be a pioneer in history. And so I think that we provide all of those opportunities to be involved in the industry, and it's just a really exciting time to be making history.
Troy, thanks again for taking the time to join us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We've been speaking to Mr. Troy Dayton. He's the CEO of the ArcView Group. With deep industry experience, the ArcView Group is ushering in the next generation of cannabis-related businesses with the ArcView Investor Network, Sea Change Research, CannAssure Insurance Services, and other groundbreaking ventures. To learn more about them, please visit their website at www.arcviewgroup.com. Thank you for watching.